He asked 3 questions, just 3. In the aftermath of everything that had already surfaced, in the shadow of one of the most toxic scandals in modern political memory, the Prime Minister's line of inquiry amounted to 3 questions. 2 of them we know. First, what was the nature of your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Second, did you ever stay at his home in New York? The full exchange remains hidden. The police have blocked publication of the complete record, sealing it behind an ongoing investigation. But from what the Prime Minister himself has since admitted, he now believes he was misled. "I made the mistake of taking Lord Mandelson at his word," he said. "That was my mistake and I own it." But let's pause there, because that statement, framed as accountability, reveals something far more troubling, a startling lack of curiosity, a lack of rigor, a lack of scrutiny. 3 questions. They are making much of the fact that he asked 3 questions, as if the number itself suggests diligence, as if it implies thoroughness. But when appointing a man who had known ties to a convicted sex offender, a billionaire financier whose crimes shocked the world, 3 questions feel not cautious, but cursory, not probing, but perfunctory. Most people would have asked far more. And now, the consequences are unfolding in real time. A single glance at the Epstein scandal, and the seismic shockwaves it has sent through British politics, is enough to understand that this is no ordinary controversy. We are witnessing a defining political moment, one that may reshape reputations, careers, and perhaps even the trajectory of a government. Peter Mandelson's dismissal as Britain's ambassador to the United States over his relationship with the convicted financier has not remained a contained incident. It has spread outward, pulling the Prime Minister into its gravitational field. This is no longer about one appointment. It is about judgment. It is about vetting. It is about trust. And for a Prime Minister already politically weakened, already facing sinking approval ratings and internal tensions, this has become existential. The portion of the story that has yet to unfold may be the most explosive of all. Because at the epicenter of this saga lies a controversy that is unlikely to shrink quietly. It is more likely to grow, to expand, to multiply, to radiate outward in widening circles before it ever begins to subside. Over the next hour, we will examine how, why, and where this could go next. Rewind just over a week. Without warning, the United States Department of Justice released nearly 3 million pages of previously sealed Epstein files. 3 million pages. More than 2,000 videos. Approximately 180,000 images. A digital archive tied to the disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Journalists, investigators, political analysts, and ordinary citizens began combing through the material, page by page, email by email, line by line. Many prominent names appear within the heavily redacted documents. Most have denied wrongdoing, but the impact of what has been disclosed or even implied is enormous. The scale alone is staggering. The implications still unfolding. And nowhere has the political reverberation been more dramatic than in the United Kingdom. Breaking developments continue. The U.S. Department of Justice has now released additional material from the Epstein archive. Analysts are still working through the vast volume of documents. Verification takes time. Context takes time, but the flow of revelations has been relentless. Millions of documents. Thousands of references. Allegations cascading in waves. According to early reviews, there are thousands of mentions of Mandelson in the files released last Friday, nearly 6,000 references by some counts. It has taken days simply to catalog them. Among the newly surfaced material are email exchanges that appear to reference sensitive economic discussions during the financial crisis, including what has been described as a €500 billion bailout context. If verified in full, the implications are profound. Politically, the Prime Minister now faces what may be the gravest test of his leadership. Observers have noted that he appeared uncharacteristically shaken when addressing the matter publicly. The focus has been on process, on how the appointment was made, how the vetting occurred, but beneath that lies a deeper question: judgment. He appointed Mandelson, knowing there had been a relationship with Epstein. That relationship was publicly reported at the time. Reports, including one in the Financial Times, had suggested Mandelson stayed at Epstein's home in 2009, after Epstein had already served jail time for child sex offenses. At the time, Mandelson said he did not recall the stay, but the allegation was not hidden. It was in the public domain. There were also reports stemming from banking investigations that described Epstein as having a particularly close relationship with Mandelson and with Prince Andrew. These facts were not secrets, and yet, when the Cabinet Office presented its due diligence briefing to the Prime Minister, he asked 3 questions. 3. He has since said he feels he was lied to, that he took Mandelson at his word. But critics argue that the real failure was not deception, it was insufficient scrutiny. For a former prosecuting lawyer known for his forensic approach, the restraint seems extraordinary. And politically, the cost has been immense. What has further intensified the crisis are the contents of the Epstein communications themselves. They make for deeply uncomfortable reading. In one exchange after Epstein's release from prison, Mandelson allegedly referred to it as Liberation Day. Epstein responded with a crude joke about celebrating with grace and modesty, reportedly the names of strippers. Mandelson replied, "Naughty boy." It is the tone, the familiarity, the levity in the shadow of serious crimes. This was not a distant acquaintance. It reads as something far closer. And that proximity now weighs heavily on the Prime Minister's decision to proceed with the appointment regardless. Then there is the second axis of concern, the alleged sharing of highly sensitive government information. Emails suggest Mandelson may have forwarded confidential material, potentially including discussions of asset sales and tax policy, to Epstein. The speed of forwarding, the sensitivity of the material, the use of a non-official email account. Each detail raises further questions. Police are investigating whether this could amount to misconduct in public office, a serious common law offense. Mandelson denies wrongdoing and has retained leading criminal lawyers. But the inquiry itself ensures that this story will not fade quietly. Meanwhile, within Downing Street, the political fallout has already begun. Resignations, dismissals, internal turmoil. The Prime Minister's Chief of Staff has departed. His communications director has gone. The Cabinet Secretary is reportedly facing removal. Officially, explanations vary, but insiders suggest that messages, communications between Mandelson and senior figures, may prove deeply compromising once published. The fear in government is not what has already emerged. It is what is still to come. Because beyond the Epstein Files lie the promised publication of communications between Mandelson and ministers, advisors, and officials. And that is the long tail of this scandal. Public displays of loyalty within the Labour Party, supportive tweets, standing ovations, may not reflect the private mood. Behind closed doors, frustration is growing. Poll numbers are collapsing at historic speed. By some measures, this is the steepest drop in support at this stage of a premiership in modern times. The Prime Minister is deeply unpopular. A by-election looms, one many expect Labour to lose. Further electoral setbacks appear likely. And yet there is paralysis. Potential successors are not ready. Rivals are weakened or entangled in their own complications. So the party waits, staring at what one insider described as the iceberg, visible and approaching, but with no clear captain prepared to seize the wheel. Comparisons to Rishi Sunak's final months before electoral defeat are already being whispered. Hope remains in number 10 that economic conditions may improve, that cost of living pressures may ease, that time may allow recovery. But the scale of turnaround required would be unprecedented. Political magic, some say. And the question lingers, is this Prime Minister a magician? Labour has not yet reached its darkest hour, but many believe it is approaching. The full force of the explosion has not yet been felt. We have seen the tremor. We are still waiting for the aftershock. Here is your fully rewritten, expanded, and cinematically enhanced version of this next section. The meaning, tone, and intent remain intact, but the language is smoother, deeper, and more emotionally resonant throughout. That's interesting. The idea of people quietly moving into what now feels like a vacuum at the top of the Labour Party, repositioning themselves, redefining its future. Because while political figures maneuver behind closed doors, another avalanche of material has just landed, and it landed with a deafening crash. The latest tranche of Epstein Files was not simply released, it descended. What followed was not just reporting, it was excavation. Going through those files, hundreds of gigabytes of raw records, has been an exercise in forensic endurance. It has required painstaking attention to detail, exhausting, relentless scrutiny. The kind of work that leaves you bleary-eyed, mentally drained, yet acutely aware that what you are reading matters profoundly. To understand that process, we can turn to someone who has lived inside it. George Greenwood, investigations reporter for The Times. George describes it first as a logistical challenge, though that phrase barely captures the scale. We are talking about hundreds of gigabytes of data, more information than many personal computers could even store. Email chains, attachments, metadata, images, scanned documents, financial references, an archive sprawling in every direction. Before journalists could analyze the content, they had to figure out how to even access it. Specialized software, partner organizations, searchable indexing systems, keyword filtration, email mapping, document categorization. The work has been methodical, almost surgical. Search by name, search by date, search by political event, search by email address, search by keyword combinations, Mandelson, Labour Party, Gordon Brown, coalition, exit. The so-called low-hanging fruit, the most immediately visible material, has already produced headline after headline. But that is only the beginning. The deeper stories, buried beneath layers of correspondence and contextual fragments, will likely emerge over weeks, perhaps months. When it came to Peter Mandelson, investigators had at least some starting point. The relationship with Epstein had already been publicly reported. That provided an anchor specific time frames where contact was known or suspected. From there, the search became more focused, looking at political transitions, looking at Gordon Brown's departure from Downing Street, looking at communications during moments of economic instability. And then suddenly, there it was. Email exchanges that showed Mandelson not merely acquainted with Epstein, but confiding in him, consulting him, sharing personal and political reflections during moments of governmental upheaval. Even stripping away questions of criminality, which Mandelson denies. The ethical shock has been enormous. Because this was not a distant association, it was proximity, familiarity, a tone that suggested comfort. And at the time of many of these exchanges, Epstein had already been convicted of serious sexual offenses. For many observers, that alone defies comprehension. Then came the market-sensitive material. During the Eurozone crisis, when Greece's financial collapse was sending shockwaves across Europe and threatening Spain and Portugal, markets were volatile, currencies unstable, investors on edge. And within the files, investigators discovered written confirmation. Mandelson informing Epstein that a deal, a massive bailout package worth hundreds of billions of euros, was imminent. Put bluntly, confirmation of a rescue package before public announcement. The kind of information that can move markets. The kind of information financiers live and breathe for. It was there in black and white. And perhaps most astonishing of all, it was written down. One might expect, if such information were ever shared improperly, that it would be done verbally, quietly, without a trace. But here it was documented. Mandelson denies wrongdoing. No charges have been filed. These points remain critical. But ethically, politically, the questions multiply. And then there is the human cost. Beyond the politics, beyond the emails, beyond the power plays. Within the archive are references to the women and girls ensnared in Epstein's web. Photographs, descriptions, messages rating girls out of 10. Casual language, banter that reads almost banal until you remember what it represents. This was not playground joking. This was not office bravado. Behind those messages lay institutionalized abuse. Young women, young girls. The normalization in tone, the chilling casualness, may be the most disturbing element of all. George admits that reviewing the material has been psychologically difficult. There are moments where one has to step away, take a breath, regain composure. Because this is not abstract. These were real lives. And journalism in this context is not simply reporting, it is bearing witness. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, another key figure has appeared and remained silent. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's former partner, appeared before the House Oversight Committee on Capitol Hill. Many hoped for revelation, for illumination, for long-awaited answers. Instead, there was repetition. I respectfully declined to answer this question and any related questions. She invoked the Fifth Amendment, the constitutional protection against self-incrimination. In American political language, she pled the Fifth. Silence. There had been speculation that Maxwell might speak, perhaps even in exchange for clemency, but that would require action from the White House. So far, there is no indication that clemency is forthcoming. In fact, several members of Congress have publicly warned against it. Maxwell was recently transferred from a high-security prison to a lower-security facility after meetings with legal representatives. The optics were not lost on observers, but officials appear wary of being seen as softening their stance. For now, she remains silent. One striking difference between the United States and the United Kingdom is the political impact. In Britain, careers have already unraveled. In America, despite numerous mentions of Donald Trump in the files, the political fallout has been comparatively muted. Names have surfaced, headlines have been written, but there have been no dramatic resignations, no immediate political collapses of equivalent scale. Why? Partly timing, partly polarization, partly political calculation. There was a moment when insiders feared this could become existential for Donald Trump, when even figures like Elon Musk, during a public feud, referenced his presence in the Epstein Files as a potential vulnerability. But as months have passed, that intensity appears to have softened. The issue still simmers. It has not vanished, but it has not exploded in the same way. Yet, there remain questions about transparency. Although millions of pages have been released, there are suggestions that millions more remain unseen. The Department of Justice maintains that remaining redactions protect victims. But members of Congress are pushing. Can redactions be lifted? Can further documents be compelled? Could the courts intervene? In Donald Trump's America, many such disputes ultimately end before a judge. The midterm elections loom. Majorities in Congress are narrow. Political leverage shifts quickly. This story, far from concluding, may simply be entering another phase. And amid all of this, amid politics and power, survivors are still fighting for justice. On Capitol Hill, Democrats and survivors announced proposed legislation known as Virginia's Law, named after Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent survivors of the Epstein scandal. The aim, to remove statute of limitations barriers for sexual abuse victims. Because justice should not expire, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer described it as long overdue. Statutes of limitations vary by state. Civil versus criminal cases differ. Child victims face different timelines than adults. Often, trauma delays disclosure for years, sometimes decades. Gloria Allred, the prominent U.S. attorney representing more than 20 survivors connected to the scandal, has long campaigned to expand victims' access to justice. She makes a crucial point. Statutes of limitations are arbitrary deadlines. If a survivor does not act within a prescribed window, the courthouse doors can be permanently shut. For child victims especially, fear, trauma, and psychological harm can delay the ability to come forward. Virginia Giuffre was able to pursue civil action in New York because of a temporary expansion in the statute of limitations. That window has since closed. Virginia's law seeks to ensure others are not locked out by time. Because, as Schumer put it, justice should not expire. And perhaps that is the thread running beneath all of this. Behind the political maneuvering, behind the resignations, behind the legal wrangling, there are victims, and their story is not about political survival. It is about accountability.